getting ready to do Cheryl's portrait. First thing to think about is how to make Cheryl be the most flattering she can be. So a portrait that we have a commission for is a bit different than a portrait like an open studio. You know, in open studio, we're just trying to go for a likeness. That's all we're trying to concern ourselves with. And when we do the Academy, third term, that's pretty much all we're concerning ourselves with too. We'll set the model up to look decent enough, but after that, you're just focusing on technique, 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 technique. But in your composition lecture class, pretty soon here, in a week or two, you're getting a lecture on portrait and formal portraiture. And one of the things in formal portraiture is that we have to start considering things like making the person look good. We already had that one lecture just recently where we talked about bella nature, omitting obvious flaws, trying to reconcile the most ideal with what we actually observe. So we're going to try and do something like that. I don't have to omit or change Cheryl to be not Cheryl anymore, but I can perhaps adjust the lighting or adjust her pose or the angle or something like that to make Cheryl the most flattering I can possibly make her in these conditions with the given time possible. So when I'm doing a portrait like this, I'll let her sit in a pose that's comfortable enough, first of all, that she can hold it, especially since I'm not going to be dealing with her body. And then secondly, I'm going to have her start looking in one direction and then slowly turning her head. Very, very slowly, so that over about the course of 20 seconds it takes her to turn her head from one direction to the other. And I'll just pick from that where it's distinctly Cheryl, what pose looks distinctly Cheryl, as well as what pose works the best with the lighting condition that we have. Because some people have very distinct profiles, but from the front they may look very generic, or vice versa. So I want to get something that looks flattering and the epitome of Cheryl. If this were going to be a long portrait, if I don't know the person, I usually like to spend an hour or a couple of hours with the person, maybe go out to eat or hang out somewhere to find out some of the mannerisms of the person. What poses do they naturally sink into? What expressions do they naturally make? And those are the things that I want to push in the portrait, because it ends up being not just about getting a photographic likeness, but it also ends up being a matter of capturing the qualities and personality that make them them. So, you know, we know Cheryl pretty well, and we could probably do something really fun with Cheryl given enough time, but since it's only 2 hours, we're just going to go pretty much for a likeness in a flattering position here. So go ahead and start staring at the skeleton, and then slowly turn your head. I'm squinting down right now as well, every so often here, so I can see how the lighting pattern is falling on her. And just keep going all the way to the window. That looks nice. And that's about as far as she could comfortably turn. I don't want to overextend her neck. It would be very uncomfortable for her. So I did like your head somewhere pointed around this direction, just like this. And then let me see. Actually, go a little. Turn your head right this way a little more. Yeah, just like that. And then hold it there for a sec. Come a little back. Back towards me, yeah. No, a little bit more that way. Okay, something like that. How does that feel, Cheryl? Okay, now keep your head the same, but look towards me for a second. So that's nice. That's a pattern we could definitely work with. Okay, and then just look straight at me with your head. Turn your head straight towards me. Pretty good as well. The model will always naturally levitate towards either looking in the same direction as their body or looking towards me, the person drawing them. I'm always a little bit nervous about having the model keep their head in one direction, like over here, and then their eyes in a separate direction, because eventually the head and the eyes will meet in the same direction. And some models will tell me, oh no, I can definitely do it, and then 10 minutes into it, their head's looking completely different. So since Cheryl hasn't modeled before, I don't want to set anything up too hard for her. So I'll have her just look at me with your head, yeah. And then I'm going to just shift over, so I'm in a spot where I can catch a little bit more light on her cheek. And actually, can I get your chair shifted over to about right here?
Like shifted or turned?
Shifted. Yeah, it's good, just like that. So now, and then turn.
Yeah.
Okay, so now she's looking at me. I get at least a little bit of light on that cheek. Not much, but just a little bit that I can work with. Okay. Is your head a little more this way? Yeah, right there. That's what I want, just like that. So that's the pose I want. Are you guys able to see my drawing paper okay? And you're able to see her okay? And she's just going to be staring straight at me here. Okay. So for this drawing, because of lack of time, I am going to go with sight size method. It'll help speed things up quite a bit. So I'm going to be just drawing Cheryl the size that I see her. Depending on where I stand, will determine how large she appears. If I stand this close and I do a sight size measurement, her head's going to be this big. That's way too small. If I stand back here and do a sight size measurement, her head will be about yay big on the canvas, which is a better size for this. We haven't talked too much about sight sizing from a three-dimensional source yet, so I won't get too much into the mechanics of that. We'll cover that in a couple weeks. But from this fixed point, turn your head just a little towards me. Yeah, just like that. From this fixed point, I will take all my measurements and then transfer them over to the drawing. So we should be able to go pretty quickly here. I want to get a good placement on the board, so I'm actually going to lower this a little. Part of my sight size process, I want to be able to take levels straight across. It's too low. If you ever watch me in Open Studio, you'll notice the first 20 minutes is all this. I'm all planning out, figuring out how I'm going to set everything up, deciding where I'm going to be standing, where I'm putting everything, and then I'll finally start, and then I'll usually end up changing it the next pose anyway. Alright, and the method I'm going to be using is the same we use in the academy. It'll be the same as we use in first term right now. The only difference is on tone paper. I'm using a charcoal pencil, a 2B, instead of a willow here. First I'm going to get a box. I want to put her head in a box on my page. Now in the academy we do this box thing because it helps us figure out what the proportions of something is, as well as the placement on the page. Before, we just let students draw a regular old plumb line down the middle of their drawing and measure off of that. It ended up not working out. Everybody always had incorrect proportions by the end of the drawing. When we got to figure, it was okay with the barred plates, but when we got to the figure and portrait, it was disastrous. So now we started doing this box thing, where essentially I'm marking the top and the bottom of my subject, and I'm marking the left and the right of my subject, and I get to see how that falls on the page before I commit to anything major. So this is only going to take a minute or so, but I can now have a feel for how big Cheryl's head will be on the page. I'll decide if I want to move it left or right to make a nicer composition. I can even at this point start to block in a basic scheme of the shoulders here to kind of see where the shoulders are going to fall, which I may or may not even draw. I know I definitely want that awesome collar in there though. It's going to be something like that. So if I'm going to include that collar, it might get a little bit crowded, so I'll move my box just a hair. Just make sure my old box matches the measurement of my new box here. Not quite. There we go. Now I'll erase out the old one. So Cheryl's head, including her hair, will fit in that box. So it's not going to be a very big head, maybe 4 inches. That's okay for a quick drawing like this, especially since I won't have time to do a whole lot of rendering on this. I don't want to bite off more than I can chew. I don't want to do an 8 or 9 inch head and then just run out of time and not be able to add any detail. But for a 4 inch head, I'll be able to pull off a likeness with the illusion of a lot of detail without much work because it's such a smaller amount to work with. When I first started drawing and painting, people were always surprised that I could do small heads because I did anything from life size down to 2 inch heads. And they would say, oh wow, I wish I could paint small. It's so great to be able to do small heads like that. And I say, oh well, it's less information. You pull off a likeness based off of the main structure of the face and the main colors. It's not off of how much detail you put in there. So a small head is a lot less work to do than a big head. And then they were impressed when I could do a life-size head, and I said, oh, it's the same as a small head, you just use bigger brushes. Right now I'm blocking the face in. I put her hair in this first box, but in the second box I'm actually putting her face, where her face is going to sit in this whole thing. Because from pose to pose, hair can change sometimes. So I want to make sure that I'm doing most of my measurements off of the face itself. So the dimensions here represent the size and placement of the face. This is with the hair included. And now it's time to start moving into the face, to putting some features in there. I'm not actually going to do features though. I'm going to squint down to see the light and the darks up here, and then I'm going to create my what's called a notan, or a shadow map, off of that. I'm mapping out all the shadows on here. This is a little trickier because the lighting condition is so soft here. Oh, now it's a little stronger. So when the sun comes out, I get a better shadow map. But I should have enough to figure this out. And what I'm going to do in this first sitting, I'm going to try and get this all done in the first sitting, is map out where, maybe not the shadows themselves, but at least where I'm putting the shadows and their proportions. So basically, I'm going to try and make a bunch of little boxes. I'm going to have a box for each eye shape, a box for the nose shape, and then for the mouth shape. So I can make sure I get the size and placement correct, and then when she gets back up there on the next pose, I can actually fine-tune her based off of where I've decided to place everything. Prior to this, I used to work in a method where I just started with one shape and rendered one shape out at a time. And that works well if, first of all, you can always consider the whole. So, as you're rendering out the eye, you think about everything else in relation to the eye. And secondly, as long as the model doesn't move. Because if the model has their head tilted in one direction while you do the eyes, and then another direction while you do the mouth, and all of a sudden your perspectives on the face start not matching up. And so it can be tricky. And when I was in Chicago, I could never get the model to be in the same pose after lunch as before lunch with their face. And sometimes they get sleepy too after lunch, and so they'd start to nod or tilt, or their eyes would close. So if I didn't have a face in for a figure painting, if I didn't have a head in by the first 3 hours, by the time we went to lunch, then I would scrap it. Or just leave it the way it was and go on to the body. Boxing in the eyes. So as I box these eyes in, and everything that I box in, I'm measuring from both my plums out here in, both of these in, and then from the other eye in. So I'm measuring everything to the whole, the head and the face, and I'm measuring everything to the individual parts, so the eyes. So everything is relating to everything currently. And at any one time I do a measurement that doesn't line up, I stop right now and figure out what it is before going any further. If I can handle all my proportional stuff right now, the rest of this drawing is going to be really easy and really fast. One thing you'll start to notice too when we begin working from three-dimensional objects instead of the copies is that your arm is not as steady as you're going to hope it to be. So you'll be taking a measurement and your arm will just be wobbling while you're trying to figure out what it is. But like anything else, it's just something that practice helps to overcome. You have to build up physical strength in your arm to be able to do this. But I will ultimately say, or I will say that ultimately, our goal is not necessarily to do all of this rigid, formal measurement with our arm. Ultimately, our goal is to train our eye well enough so that we can not have to measure everything individually, but just be able to say, block in an eye or eye proportions, and then from that be able to gauge about how big the other eye should be and the nose and everything, and just see everything how it relates to one another on the page without having to do these formal measurements. That's ultimately our goal. Because if we can do that, we can work a lot faster, we can have more accuracy, we can talk to the model, and then just fall back onto our formal measurements when we need to. So I practiced this a lot in Chicago. Whenever I would go to open studios on the train, I would be sketching people. And when you're sketching people on the train, you have about 2 minutes before they notice you or do something else. Usually they're on your phone. You get a lot of drawings of people doing this on there. But you can at least get a basic notan sketch in there, a basic structure of the head sketched in there in a small amount of time. And you're just relying off of taking visual plumbs, visual levels, visual triangulation, seeing where everything lines up and interconnects. And you just develop that sense of proportions. And then that allows you to do this really, really fast. So I could start this way. And that's how I would always start my drawings before. Either with the pencil or with the willow. Just start scribbling in this notan. And then in the end of the first 5 or 10 minutes, have this notan that looks like her face. And then go on from there. But then that sort of becomes misleading, I find, to people who have never done this before. And they think it's some sort of, like magical or God-given talent that I can just throw the shapes up there and know where they're at and be put in the right spot. And some artists will even say like, oh, I don't measure, I just put the shapes up there. And it's very deceiving because we all started this way. We all had to figure out how to do this formal stuff to train our eye to be able to not have to do the formal stuff. So I can make this like a magic trick where I go up there and 30 minutes I have a likeness and then I just spend the rest of the time noodling a finish. And you're like, wow, that's amazing. But to not show you this stage is basically lying about the first several years of my training just to make me seem good now. So you don't want to sort of whitewash. You don't want to conceal this part. You want to give it its due attention. Let yourself build up the skill and the dexterity here. Now we have a robot face. That's Cheryl. This is a robot. How you doing, Cheryl?
Good.
Do you need a break?
No. Okay.
Are you sure?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, from here we can carve out a basic scheme. So I can go 2 ways. I can either get a basic scheme of the head, or I can start carving in some schemes of the features, and then from there start to get the shape of the head in. Either way, it doesn't really matter. Maybe I'll just get some big lines in here, like the hair here. I'll get the overall big chops here. My basic scheme of the hair, basic scheme of the face. So a scheme, for those of you who don't know, is a simplified geometric shape, usually 4 to 8 lines, that describes the subject that we're looking at here. So if I could just chop Cheryl down into an irregular shape of as few lines as possible, it would be this kind of weird sort of hexagon-y looking thing. For a portrait like this, I do like to stay pretty open on my overall scheme for the head and the face, which is different than what we do in class. In class we do a really formal scheme, and then we break it down and get the envelope, and then we go from there. But here my primary importance is actually the inside of the face. And I will figure that out first, and then if I need to change the outside of the head to match the inside of the face, then I've got some room to grow. So we're just going to do some basic stuff, keep it open, be okay if it needs to change. And now I'm going to start to carve out some of the eye shapes here. So Cheryl, why did you get here at 120? You barely made it. I almost had to start without you. You can talk. It's okay.
Well,
Oh, you got me that energy drink.
got you an energy drink.
That's right. That's what I need.
Make sure you stay awake.
Yeah, that's the important thing. I can still make a drawing if you fall asleep, but if I fall asleep, it's a little
Well,
harder.
the problem is, you fall asleep, you drop your pencil. And that's
Oh yeah, you don't want to have to
really
sharpen a
bad.
pencil. That's the worst.
That's it. That's why I got you.
Yeah, you guys all know now how
Yeah.
hard that is. Everybody swears and curses. All the sailors come out.
Yeah. So he drops a pencil in class, and everybody goes, "Oh no!"
There's a collective sigh.
Understandable.
Understandable. I got
Alright. So again, I'm just doing some basic schemes of each of these before I get too detailed. And these basic schemes, you'll notice I can handle from way back here. I don't need to get up there, don't need to noodle, don't need binoculars or anything at this stage. Given enough time, I might actually pull out binoculars, but probably not today. There's not enough time today. And if you always hold true to this idea, which is so hard to believe in, that it's all about the structure of the face, then you'll be able to actually pull something like this off. And I was very stubborn coming about to this conclusion because of the way I first learned how to paint, which was just, first of all, just reading books. And I kind of misinterpreted some of the Richard Schmid book, where he just says, squint down, see a shape, paint it, then do the next one, then do the next one, then do the next one. So that's like literally how I did it. I just did one shape, one shape, one shape. And if you copy it correctly, it does turn into a nice painting that looks like it has structure. But it's kind of the hard way, upstream, you know, where you have to put so much focus and attention into every single step. And if one little shape's wrong, then you could lose your whole structure and all this sort of stuff. Eventually, I came around to understanding this more, and it's actually helped demonstrations out a lot because you don't run into as much of the issue with getting a likeness. And because I'm always working this formal method, always worrying about the structure. If it's not looking like the person, I know it's a structure issue, and I go back to that, and I can usually resolve it. It wasn't until like maybe 2 years ago that I finally got on that bandwagon. But yeah, the other portion of my art training was a workshop here with Jeremy Lipking, because I never laid down any paint. I didn't know sort of the mechanics of putting paint onto a canvas without lifting the other layers off. Like, it didn't make sense to me. I tried it in high school. I tried oil painting with some really terrible oil paints, and it just didn't work. You know, you put one, and especially with cheap brushes. You know, cheap paint with cheap brushes, you put paint down and it just pushes other paint aside. I was like, why would anybody paint with this? This is stupid. And then I just used acrylics for so long. So when I decided, you know, after seeing some of these paintings in a magazine by Jeremy Lipking and Daniel Graves and Richard Schmid, I said, okay, well, obviously there's something about oil painting I'm missing, because everybody's still making really good paintings, and it's not, it must be something more to it. And so I signed up for a workshop by Jeremy Lipking, and that was essentially how I learned to apply paint to the canvas. That was my main interest in that workshop. And when I watched him paint, he was a shape-to-shape painter too. He did this sort of an overall blocking for the color of the head, and then from there, he just went to the eyes and just rendered out eyes. From there, rendered out nose. From there, rendered out mouth. And just filled it out, like it sort of bloomed out of the center of the canvas, and which I thought was totally awesome. And so that's how I painted, and didn't even think about the structure issue at all. And that's almost, you know, actually an impressionistic way of painting. You just see a shape or color, you respond to it, you lay it down. If you do it well enough, everything works out. But it ends up being a sort of a roll of the dice. And eventually, I got tired of rolling the dice and being right sometimes and wrong other times. You know, when I was right, it looks awesome, and it comes out great, and you get really excited. But then you have to suffer through like 5 or 10 paintings that don't work out, and you're just pulling out your hair trying to figure out what the deal is. And I realized that it's the structure. That's what it came down to. How you doing, Cheryl? I'm going to give you a break in a couple minutes. Unless you want to break now.
I'm okay.
You okay? You sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
Drink your energy drink.
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do on my break.
You're good. I was gonna drink it.
Oh, you're gonna drink it?
No, just kidding.
Cheryl's doing a good job. Was anybody here for the demonstration of Earl last term? Did you see that, Cheryl?
I was out of town.
Oh, were you? Did you see that, Valerie?
Yep.
That was fun. Earl was talking like the whole time, but it works. You know, once I get the basic boxes in here, then we can have a lot more fun, you know?
Oh, I'll be talking all the time. Too.
Good. Okay, we're almost ready for a break. Figure that out. So Cheryl has her still life drawing here also that she won the best still life with last term. So make sure you guys check it out.
Mm-hmm. It's in the hallway.
Where is it, Cheryl?
Right over here.
Oh, right over here? Yeah. Oh, yeah, under that tracing table. We're going to spray it today.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Did she also have the bark plate or the cast downstairs?
No, that was Karen.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Karen's traveling between here and New York right now. All right, I'm just going to plant the neckline in, and then we're going to take a break here. Just using a plumb to see where it lines up to all of this. All right, Cheryl, let's take a break.
All right. It's about 25 minutes, 27 minutes, I think.
All right, so we got Cheryl back up here. She's pretty much into the right pose. I don't have to be too picky about her in the right spot because I can actually, you know, if I needed her to turn a little left or a little right, I can just shift my position one step to the left or one step to the right or whatever. You know, so I can work with what I have. Basically, she gets in the general right spot, and then I observe her and then fit it into the boxes and scheme that I have set up on my paper. So even if there is a little bit of shifting, I can compensate because I already have a solid structure lined up here. So that's good enough for us to work with. So we're going to start carving out some of these boxes a little more. I am not going to do this really site size. And I was just talking to Eric about this here on the break, that I'm now going to rely mostly on comparative and triangulation. So I'm going to check angles with my pencil and then compare it to the drawing. And I'm going to just compare sizes of one shape to another shape. And then doing that, I will carve out these boxes. And every once in a while I can just step back to my site size spot to check and make sure that nothing's getting too big or too large while I do that. Especially with the face, you know, features can be kind of small, and so they can kind of get out of hand pretty easily. So I will still try to step back quite a bit. But I can squint during most of this, just like we do in our little warm-ups. And that will allow me to just make sure I'm not drawing any too much detail in the eyes here. You know, I want to simplify that whole lower part of the socket there, and then into the eye here, and then the eyeball and the eyelid up here all into dark. And try to carve these out in angles. I need this to look very angular here. One of the mistakes some students make is going too rounded too soon, especially with females. You know, we say we want them to be pretty, and so we want to round things off and make them softer. That'll actually hurt you because we have a tendency to round things, overextend things, make things a little too bubbly. So even on females, you'll notice that straight lines are going to work a lot better to capture a likeness. And then maybe at the very, very, very end of this, I can think about getting some things more rounded. Check some angles here. The shadow map is not as strong over here. It kind of just melts from dark into light. So I'm just doing a judgment call, making my best idea for where I want the termination of light to dark to be. And it'll eventually get softened so much that it'll be lost. That transition will be lost quite a bit later. Now we have about an hour and a half or 2 hours left on this drawing with Cheryl sitting here. Technically Open Studio ends at 4. Usually people take 15 to 30 minutes to clean up there. So we might be able to stretch this to 4:30. So if I know I have 2 hours left to work on this, and I know that a likeness is in the structure, which I'm working on now, I want to actually spend more time on this and less on finishes. I could get really into finishes. I could probably spend 2 hours just making one eye really, really nice to show you how to get all the way through the finishing. But then I only have one eye on here. But if I want a portrait that looks like Cheryl and has kind of the essence of Cheryl, it has nothing to do with the finishes I put on. It has to do with the structure. So I'm going to spend a good hour or so at this stage, carving everything out, making sure I'm 100% happy with this before moving on to the next stage. If it doesn't look like her by the end of the stage, then it's a huge red flag. I have to stop and go back and start redoing things. You're going to be a celebrity, Cheryl.
All right.
Everybody's watching you.
That's good. Still maybe 2 round.
So we have, this is where the nostril, beginning of the nostril is, and then it actually goes into this little cast shadow underneath the nose, so I'm kind of following that around. This all gets lost on the left side into shadow, so I can actually start to delete a lot of this. This is excess information I don't need. Actually pull the nose all the way up there. Again, this nose becomes a bit of a judgment call as to where exactly it starts to turn from light to dark, because it's almost a seamless gradual transition of value. If I squint way, way down, I could probably say it's about right here. And that's what I'll do. You know, if I am confused, or I'm not sure what to do next, or I don't quite know how to handle an area.
You asked him what to do.
Yeah, yes. But I have to ask myself.
Exactly.
And so I ask myself, and the little voice in my head says, "Squint, Tim, squint!" And so I squint extra hard, and then I can see where is a good place to make that break between light and dark. Because ultimately, right now, I'm not thinking at all about anatomy. I don't have to know anything about anatomy to do what I'm doing now. I just need to keep in mind my difference between light and dark, just my abstract shape-seeing ability. Some schools will instruct students to think of it like when you look at clouds and you say, oh, that cloud looks like a bunny or an ice cream cone or something like that. So they'll say, try to find the animal shapes. You know, so whatever helps you think of this not as an eye, but as some sort of abstract shape. So the distance from here to here is incorrect. So I have to pull this. I think both need to change a little bit. So I'm going to shift my eye over, adjust my angle of the nose, and then I'll actually do a measurement again, just to see.
What is my nose style?
That's a good question. See, I'm not even to anatomy yet. A little bit of Roman. Got a bit of a Roman nose. Angled keystone. The bottom of the nose is turned down just a little bit.
Learned that in second semester.
Oh, okay.
It's hard to look at your own nose.
Is that going to be on the test?
It will be.
Actually, yes.
Yeah.
The Roman Greek nose.
Yeah, we have. We go by Vanderpool's descriptions or classifications of noses, just sort of a launching off point. So there's only three really that we're looking at, which is the Greek, Roman, and pert. And pert, like a pert nose. So like all the pinup girls, yeah, would have the upturned nose. And you have to be careful with those, because if you are drawing someone with a pert nose and you have them with their chin high, it looks like they've got a little pig nose. And so we use this to sort of make a more flattering pose too. So if somebody has a very Roman nose, very downturned nose, then you angle them up a little bit, and then it looks like a nice, clean, flattering nose. Or you angle them in such a way that it really shows off their nose, so it has that characteristic of them. But we start with, when we're getting into features, trying to identify that to make sure that our perspective matches our anatomical observations. So I can take comparative measurements up here because when I'm back here, my angle to the model is the same. So I don't advance necessarily toward my drawing, I advance toward the model. And all the angles stay the same, so I can from here take a comparative measurement, say from the nose to the side of her face, and then compare it to the eyes in here, and see that the real side of the head should be about here. And from there I can start to cut things in. One of the things we do in term one here, once we get the scheme, we do our box. We actually do some anchors, which I haven't really done yet. But this eye has become my anchor. I'm launching everything off of that eye. So we establish a box, we establish some anchors, we get some schemes in there, and we always try to carve inward with the scheme. So we think of this as like a chunk of marble, and I'm slowly chiseling her away and making her more and more like Cheryl by carving out all of the extra little lines and paper that I don't need. How you doing, Cheryl?
You're good. I'm actually on a beach somewhere, but
Oh, there you go.
bring me back.
Oh yeah, sorry about that. Sharp turn back to reality, huh? Are you here this whole term, Cheryl?
Yes.
Okay, it's next term that you have to
Yeah.
leave
Travel
in
around the
middle?
world.
Yeah.
Oh, Lord.
Cheryl's a world traveler.
Tough break.
Cheryl's
Yeah.
going to help us organize a workshop next year to Switzerland, right?
Oh, goody,
Switzerland?
yay.
Yeah. So, if anyone wants to paint those Swiss Alps a la Heidi, then that's kind of
It'll
what
be
we're
in
going to
summer, I
do.
hope.
What's that?
Fall, probably fall.
Fall? Yeah, fall.
Rates are down for flying and
Yeah.
hotels and things like that too. But I'll be in the Middle East this summer, in the summer, so.
Ooh.
Yikers.
Yeah, but it's I like humidity, so it'll be a bit humid when I'm going. I just can't take any nude photos with me to draw.
Oh.
Can't take the Vanderbilt book with me, they'll confiscate it.
That's right.
So what if they're very like diagramish, like Bridgman stuff?
Yeah, they'll
Is that
probably
no-
take that too.
oh, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
That would be the easiest thing if they confiscate it versus, some of the other things they could do to you.
Oh, yeah. We draw a lot of camels, pomegranates.
There you go.
whatever.
Drawing camels the same way as drawing people.
Yeah.
Shapes are just a little different.
Yeah.
Just a So the goal here, which is really tricky for a lot of students to kind of navigate through, is the difference between carving things out and describing more of the shadow map correctly versus getting detail. I don't want to get any detail in here, I just want to be carving out the shadow map here. Getting everything a little closer to being correct, a little closer to being correct. And so that's sort of hard to figure out for students. Do your head a little straighter. Actually, no, I'm sorry, turn back. Go a little A little more. No, the other way. The other way. Yeah, like that. Oh, not that much. That much. Yeah, there you go. There it is. Yeah. Your head's gonna fall off.
We'll
Yeah,
just
your
put it
head-
back on.
Actually, that tilt was really nice if I had started with that. Most people can't hold that though. You get like a real big pain in the neck there. Anyway, so the challenge here is describing information, but not describing detail. So everything that I do and carve out is not a detail. It's just describing a shadow shape more. Details are these little incidental things that like a wisp of a hair or an eyebrow or eyelids or eyelashes. Those are all details. I don't want to concern myself with details, but I do need to refine this enough so that it reflects everything correctly. So there's a difference between refinement and adding detail, and that's really hard to sort of figure out when you're first starting.
And coffee.
You ruined the whole drawing, Cheryl.
I know, I blew away the charcoal dust. I love allergies.
Oh, no. So how's the Middle East going to be with allergies?
There shouldn't be any. There's nothing
Oh, really?
there except palm
Just-
trees.
Oh, that's true. That's why people used to come here, huh?
I'll be in Bahrain.
Are you just going for a visit?
Yeah, be there about 10, 12 days. My husband's going to be working in Saudi, so we're going to be Bahrain.
You'll notice I'm having a much easier time keeping cleaner, thinner lines than you guys are with your willow. One of the advantages of working with the charcoal pencil instead of willow. But the willow teaches you a light touch, which is what you're going to have for painting. Some of the painting students are starting to find out that a lack of a light touch is preventing them from layering paint on correctly. And that's all with the willow. They do that, huh, Cheryl?
Yeah.
Yeah, Cheryl's figuring that out now.
Bahrain is a very moderate country in the Middle East, and so I won't have to wear veils unless I went into a mosque.
That's not too bad.
The suits are supposed to be wonderful over there.
Yeah, there's two of them. My husband has worked in that area several different times. He's
Like
soups, shopping.
Districts, the gold
Yeah.
and the carpets. And
We have a very slight angle of the mouth. Lipstick tends to be a little more tricky to render out, so we don't usually let students draw models with makeup on, because the additional color actually adds a whole nother level of complexity. And normally when we're drawing, we want to reduce the color to just try and see things in terms of black and white. So that's one reason why we have these big yellow bulbs that we put on the model. It basically just washes all of the color out of them, turns them into like an orange Oompa Loompa. So you don't have to worry about color. And so you just have to be careful if there's a little extra color. You know, the red does change the value of the lips a little bit. So instead of maybe just having the top lip in as a dark, I'm having the top lip plus some of the bottom lip as a dark, so it's a little bit more. Eventually it should read correctly as long as I get all my value relationships accurate. So I don't have to worry about it too much, but it's just something to keep in mind.
Tim, is your paper toned to about a 5 or a 4?
Maybe a 5.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's pretty good mid value. Maybe a hair lighter.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd say a hair lighter. Maybe a 6. We're going with this tilt. I'm just going to tweak a few of these angles because Cheryl is gravitating toward the tilt, and I like the tilt. It's a nice tilt. It adds some elegance to it. So instead of straightening her out, I want to actually include this. And so it's just a few angles that I need to fix. It's not a huge deal for me. for the students, we probably wouldn't get this far along and then introduce a tilt. So you don't have to worry about that. But when we have academy models, I usually only let the model coordinator hire certain models that I've had or drawn before to make sure that they can keep a standardized pose, or at least so that I know which poses they can do and which poses they can't do. We get those over ambitious models sometimes. But it is just a few basic lines coming through, just adjusting the angles here, there, making sure my levels are corrected a little bit. So I'm just raising a few guys on the right, lowering a few guys on the left. Shouldn't be too big of a deal.
What kind of eraser are you using?
A kneaded eraser right now. When I'm erasing lines, I don't need any subtlety about it now. I usually want them gone. So one of the things we talk about is leaving lines just long enough until we don't need them anymore. So that's kind of what I'm doing every once in a while. I take out the kneaded eraser and get rid of a few of those guys. And yeah, I want them completely gone when I need to get rid of them. Let's move that neckline in a bit now. All of my tilts, all of my angles, and all of my comparative measurement is going to be easier from this distance of the model than it is from back of my sight size. So again, I really want to use sight size as a starting off point, and then after that, try to move on, because I can get a higher level of refinement from up here.
So the purpose for sight size originally was to visualize it on the paper to a better scale more than it was to see her differently.
Well, also just to get my basic placement of shapes correct in relation to each other. So it just ends up being a really, really quick way to get something blocked in accurately. And I'll still use it now, even though I'm primarily using our other methods of measurement, just because when I step back here and flick my eyes back and forth, I can still compare the two right away. So that allows me to figure out where I might need to inspect certain areas for some correction, more so than I would be without it. And even when I step back, when you're painting, you have to step back even if you're not sight sizing. You have to step back to see how things are visually reading and condensing from a distance. Same is true here. When I get into the rendering, I want to see how it looks from a distance, because it needs to look good from a distance before it looks good from up close. The same principle will hold true. So I need to step back anyway. So if I have a sight size marker back here that I'm measuring off of, it's sort of additional incentive for me to step back, and it keeps me measuring more frequently.
Are you using a 2B or HB?
A 2B. Yeah. An HB would actually be a little too light on this paper, so I might scratch it if I was trying to get some information visible from my sight size spot. And a 6B would just let off so much charcoal that I might run into some issues. Cheryl, we've been going for about 20 minutes. How you doing?
Good.
You okay? You don't need a break?
A couple more minutes, I'd be okay.
Okay. Let me get some few big cuts down here. I'll take a bit of a break. You need to make sure you give your model enough head on top. We have this, for some reason, we always think the eyes are placed higher than they actually are. And the eyes are sort of right in the middle of the head. And if you don't give the model the top of their hair, then we end up cropping out quite a bit of brain.
I don't need that.
Yeah, nobody wants that.
Oh, okay.
Figure out where this ear is placed back here. Down on the bottom. So where the ear is placed will also tell the viewer how the head is tilted. So without even realizing it, we kind of figure out that the tilt of the head based off of that. We'll just block in the ear here. We'll take a break, Cheryl.
That's fine. Got pressure on that right ulnar nerve and my hand's gone to sleep. It's
Oh,
fine. No, it's
no.
fine. But it just, I'm like, well, that's
Well,
silly.
we should definitely take a break
No, I'm
here.
fine.
This gets carved in. Okay, let's take a break, Cheryl.
All right. You just have to get my head back. It's funny, you don't
Yeah.
realize you're tilting your head.
I know,
And then when
yeah.
he says tilt it and then straighten it, I'm like, I thought it was straight. You mean it's not straight?
No, the other way. Yeah, like that. Yeah, right there. That's great. Yeah, that's good. Perfect. All right, how are we doing on time here? So 3. So I'm going to try and do this last session
You're trying to
on the shadow map here, and then we're going to push forward. I'm going to actually try to also, at the end of this one, or closer to the end of this one, I'm going to mask this all in and get a notan. A notan essentially just being light and dark. It's actually a Japanese term, which we didn't use until very recently. Before then, we would just say block in the lights and the darks, or seek out the light and the dark, or the black and the white. Or everyone had a sort of their own phrasing for the same thing, which is filling in the shadow map. And shadow map is a historic term, so we do use that. And shadow map is, again, just the mapping of lights and darks.
Is the light changing dramatically for you? It feels like for me,
Yeah.
when I'm sitting, it's.
check.
Yeah,
It's too.
even during the sittings, it's changing, lighter, darker,
Uh-huh.
bluer, yellower.
What do you, as the artist, how do you handle that? What do you do? Just go with what you're seeing at the moment, or?
It's sort of a combination. I used to only be able to draw and paint what I see, and so conditions were really hard for me. I learned to become an efficient painter, so you can deal with things like fleeting light or sunsets or whatever. If you want to capture sunset, you have to paint it in 30 minutes. So I learned how to paint a sunset in 30 minutes. You just do it enough to develop the speed. But now that I have more knowledge, I can also rely on knowledge a little more. And so I do that for some paintings, like the ones I'm doing back there, where I'm, calling on sculptural reference to paint a portrait. And I'll add the color to it later. So yeah, it's kind of like a lot of stuff in this program. You just learn to deal with it. And the palette and chisel was good for that too, because the palette and chisel was always just like this. It would be clear part of the day and then overcast the other part of the day. And so with painting, essentially what you do for your colors, your value structure stays the same, pretty much. You wouldn't go changing the value structure too much. So even though the lighting is changing a little bit on here, I'm still sticking to the general shadow mapping that I had, and I'm just kind of refining that, trying to seek out what I saw before, even though it may be faint sometimes, and then just refine that. And then as far as color would be concerned with fleeting or shifting light like this, it's essentially whatever you end up putting in the beginning becomes your key, and then you key everything to that. So you just establish the same relationship on your canvas. And luckily, if you paint something well enough, the correct color enough, then when the light shifts on the model, if your canvas is in the same light and you painted it correct colors, it will shift also. So the colors on the canvas will shift with the colors on the model, and then you just keep going on from there. It becomes a little more tricky if you have different light on the model and your canvas. But some artists, I know, actually like shifting light. They like the idea that you get some values in color information when it's overcast and some when it's sunny. And I even know one artist who is designing an artificial light with LEDs that twinkled and shifted and differed in luminosity so it would mimic overcast shifting light in Chicago. I'm getting pretty close here. This is good. Throw some comparative measurement in here. Good. Figure out the back of the neck. So to find the back of the neck here, I measured on her from the neck to the chin. And then I switched it going up to see where it fell on her, and from the chin to the eyebrow. So then when I went back to my drawing, I went chin to eyebrow, and then jaw to back of the neck. So I just did the reverse. That tells me where to sink that line there. Carve out that ear. I usually, in demonstrations like this, I won't get too refined in the ear. I'm essentially just going to try to suggest it and not call too much attention to it so that it's there and it doesn't look awkward, but it's not too refined. Of all the things to spend time on in a portrait drawing like this, the ear is going to be very low priority.
Otherwise, it could take all your time.
Right. Yeah, I don't want the face unfinished and then have a good ear.
Yeah.
Doesn't make sense.
Yeah. At least the eyes.
Wow, that ear looks just like you.
Right.
Just the hint of an ear.
I always thought the eyes were the hardest, but now I'm realizing the ears are 10 times harder.
You know, it's I try to encourage students to really get away from the idea of thinking of things in terms of being hard, because you sort of set up at that point a mental block for yourself, which makes it harder to conquer some of those things, because you go into it thinking, oh, I'm so frustrated, eyes are so hard, or ears or hands or whatever, I just don't know how to handle it. But if you always remember the golden rule, they're all abstract shapes, we squint down, we lay it in, find the structure, open our eyes, add detail, then nothing is more challenging than anything else. Some things are more intricate. Some things are more, have smaller shapes that need refining. Those things can be considered challenging because they require more attention to smaller shapes. But saying something is harder than something else just provides a barrier for you, preventing you from zeroing in. So just the golden rule again, just keep in mind all you have to do is squint, find the abstract shape, and then carve it out. And then the anatomy takes care of itself.
So right now I look like a horse.
Yeah.
And part of me looks like a tulip, and part looks like a peanut, and part looks like
Cotton candy.
Yeah.
This idea is really hard for students to really take to heart when they're doing their self-portraits at home, because everybody's worried that they want it to look like themselves, and so they start off with features and eyes or nose or whatever it is you think is most characteristically you, and ultimately you end up with several disjointed features that don't really come together to show the structure that's you. And so everybody ends up working backwards, trying to add structure to a bunch of features, and sometimes they can get sort of what you might call a caricature type of version of themselves, but it doesn't look like a solid, good portrait, and you just really have to concern yourself with that abstract shape every time. Okay, so from here I think we're about ready to start filling in the notan, seeking out some of these shapes more specifically.
There's a squirrel.
There's a squirrel. Find the squirrel.
Cheryl the squirrel.
The majority of what's up there is about the value of the paper. Let's see. In the lights. And then it looks like the darks are a little darker. So I will be filling in a bit more with the darks and a little less with the lights. Normally I like to hit a toned paper, or get a toned paper that is halfway in the middle between the lights and the darks. That makes it pretty easy to sort out where I'm going to be using the white chalk, where I'm going to be using the dark pencil. Turn a little towards me. Yeah, like that. A little less. Yeah, there you go. Thanks. What we'll do here is I'll seek out these shapes here, and then I'll try to correct them once I fill in the shadow map. And then I'll take a break, and then I'll come back from break and give it one last once over before advancing to the next step. My goal here is not to establish distinct values. I'm not trying to shade this right now. I'm just trying to fill in the darks and the lights. In this case, this is really almost a 3-value drawing. I've got the dark side, I've got the light side, and then I've got the dark darks, which is like the eyes and the lips in this case. So I am going to try and hit these in. I normally wouldn't want to do that, but because this is such a subtle drawing, it'll actually help me navigate things a little bit more. Since I don't have a clear distinction in most cases between light and dark, doing this will help me make sure I have a likeness before I advance to the next stage.
We might get some thunderstorms tonight.
Oh no.
No.
Well, I just hope I get home before it happens.
You will. It's not supposed to be.
Because I don't think my car is weatherproof.
Just put an umbrella on the top of it.
Yeah, there we go.
Or in the car, put an umbrella in.
That would be pretty funny.
Yeah.
I'll just drive with the top down, holding an umbrella.
Exactly. Mr. Beans.
All right, as I start to fill this in, it actually is looking a little bit more like Cheryl, which is good. But we can still refine this even more. So we'll just give this one more fill in here. And normally when I do this, I don't even need the model up here for this stage. So when I actually have a strong directional lighting, you could probably get down if you want. When I have a strong directional lighting, I'll do this on break, because I know that light is light and dark is dark, and I'm not making these this extra decision that I don't normally make about this sort of halftone sort of thing. So I don't waste my time with the model there. I would spend until the rest of the sitting really refining that shadow map. And then when the model's not up there, then I'll knock this in and then I'll analyze it when she gets back.
Now I know what models are doing on this side of the board, the drawing board.
Right. They're going out of their mind with board on Norway.
No.
They're having a Walter Mitty moment.
Have their what?
A Walter Mitty moment.
Planning what I'm doing for dinner.
Yeah. Sometimes you play a movie in your head.
Yeah. I had some medical procedures once that I had to lie still for 20-minute segments.
Oh, God.
Ooh.
Yeah, I mean, totally perfectly still. So I would go through a process of like baking brownies. Get out the bowl, get 2 eggs, you know, and I would bake brownies, but by the end of it, I didn't have any brownies.
Oh, that's sad.
I know, and
It's
I
like
was
doing all the
picking
work
them
and getting
all the way
nothing out of it.
I have all the nerve.
My pencil became too dull to deal with some of the smaller shapes, so I'm switching to a sharper pencil. Although this is an HB, so the marks won't be quite as bold here. But I'm going to correct, at this point, little things like the eyebrow in here. One more, another pass at the eye in there. Make sure that's correct. Where can I carve that out? I'll even now start to utilize my quick eraser because I want to get a little more specific with some of these shapes, get a little more control in.
What kind of eraser?
It's a click. It's a white eraser that you can click and extend out. So because of the nature of it being a firm eraser, like a white eraser, it allows me to be a little more precise than the kneaded eraser, which, you know, falls apart when you apply pressure. So you can't do very small shapes with it.
I found recently they have some smaller diameter ones.
Oh yeah, it's some
It's called
they're-
Zero Mono.
Zero Mono, yeah. It's like a Japanese,
It is. Yeah.
sleek. It's
Yeah.
all metal looking.
Yeah, I got it at Blick.
Yeah, they're pretty good for some small shapes. The only problem with those is they're not as firm as some of these other white ones. So you blow through them a lot faster. You know, they dissipate quicker. And sometimes it's hard to get a clean, crisp edge with it. Okay, pretty close here. I can carve out a little more information in the nose. I'm ignoring all reflected light on the one side of the nose there. It's too light. It's not doing much. I'll go back to this guy. Alright. You ready for a break, Cheryl?
Okay.
Alright, let's take a break and then we'll come back and I'll do one last check of these shapes before going to the next stage.
Tell me again the name of that eraser.
It's just a white clicky eraser. Everybody calls it different things.
Are you all in the first semester?
I am. Yeah, we are.
Okay.
They are.
Yeah.
5 of us, yeah.
I haven't started yet.
Oh, great.
I'm at 28.
Oh, really? Oh,
That's super
exciting.
Yeah. I had really zero art experience
Really?
or training.
You're kidding. Oh,
And I feel like, you know, I've gotten a good foundation. The only thing I really need to do now is spend more time just practice.
Yeah.
I've had some other, you know, obligations. I work sort of part-time, so I have to.
Yeah, sure.
You're done?
Pardon?
2 years, you're done, finished?
I'm not done yet, no.